FemTech Real Money Talks.
Welcome to FemTech Real Money Talks, the podcast where the pulse of FemTech beats loudest. I'm your host, Helena Lipilina, and I'm the founder of Visible Sports. In each episode, we dive deep into the world of fundraising for FemTech startups. And today is a very, very special episode for me personally and our team, because our today's guest is Ida Teen, who's the co-founder of Clue and the mother of the term FemTech, the very term that gave the name for our a big part of our podcast and gave direction for our interest in this whole vertical, and actually phrased it for us, the innovators in the world of women's health. So I couldn't be more excited and thrilled to host you here today, Ida. Really, it's a big deal for us, and I know it feels like I'm hyping. I really am. I'll try to measure it, but I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, and I'm really looking forward to have this conversation as no bullshit as we normally have, and I kind of expect no less from you. So welcome here, Ida. So good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Good. So the first thing is, we use the word in the term femtech a lot, and you've been asked this question, and I've personally seen you answer this question many times. But our listeners and our audience is a diverse audience, and some of them might not be aware of how this term was created, and how this term came to be. And if you don't mind, tell us how you came up with this.
I'm happy to. So I had been invited to speak at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco in 2016. They were doing their first ever panel on female health. And I was looking to see who the other panelist would be. And as I was reading on the websites, I noticed that our language was sort of like kind of a little bit over the place. I knew how hard it was for us at Clue to find the right words to describe what we're doing, because yes, we were a peer tracking app, but we felt we were in a way more than that. We were also kind of helping women navigate really their reproductive lives. We're trying to do a lot of educational content. We're doing science work. And as I was reading about these other companies, I realized that they felt very sort of like we were sisters or brothers, like we were in the same sort of tribe, trying to somehow, like, we had like a greater goal, which was beyond, in a way, our own companies, was this thing of how do we move female health forward. And I really had this thought, like, what if the world could perceive us as one, instead of each of us being understood as these little sort of weirdos doing niche things that were also a little bit icky. Because of course female health is a huge natural part of life. So I thought if we had a term, it would be easier for people to understand us as one. It would be easier for people to talk about us without having this sort of social awkwardness around it. Because often men would have to, somehow present these companies to the partnerships. And I thought if they could say a femtech company instead of a, this company helps women not pee in their pants or something, that would be much easier. And then also for us to find each other. So then I ran around. I tried to ask a few people at the conference, hey, if you were being labeled under this label, how would that feel? Would you, would that be helpful? And so in my sort of micro user research way, I got a couple of people like, yeah, that sounds okay. I was like, okay,
how
this.
micro
and then
was this micro?
So just
to get a scope.
Maybe
Okay.
5 people.
Yeah, that's good enough.
Like a user research of 5 people, maybe 5 founders. And then my co-founder, he said we should trademark this word so that nobody can take it and kind of use it for one company only. And we should do a Wikipedia entry so people could see sort of what is the origin of this name. And we also had one of our investors, his partner from Unisquare Ventures, Fred Wilson, wrote a blog post about it, and many. So we kind of gave it a little push, and then I don't think we really thought that much more about it. And now I can see that it has indeed been helpful for people to sort of find each other and get more visibility. But I don't think I had any real idea that one word could make a difference in that way when I came up
It
with it.
really did. It really did, and
Yeah.
it transformed. I feel like it did transform the industry, as a whole, because it gave. I mean, like, we hosted this brunch last week, and we had amazing founders coming in, to the space in Lisbon, talking about femtech. And one of the things that they've said is exactly what you're describing right now. That we now kind of, there's a clearer vision of what we're doing in which space, and there is a sense of community, and that's an important, it's an important part of that. Like, if you say femtech, you kind of already understand there is a community behind it, and you have some sort of like-mindedness, and some sort of common understanding that you don't need to spell out certain things, so why is it important, why you're doing what matters, and it's kind of a it's a huge step forward at the same time. My question is, like, before you came up with the term, when you were pitching, or when you were participating in any sort of conferences, how would you, like, which track would you kind of assign to yourself, or to Clue? Where would you put Clue? Was it like health tech, med tech? What was it?
Yeah, good question, because we were also trying to build hardware. So we were already this sort of two-headed monster that people didn't know, whether they should send to their life science folks in their fund or their tech people. And that was actually a really big challenge. And it was one of the reasons why we realized that it was too difficult to try and do both. When, of course, the magic was actually in the combination. And I think now everybody understands that if you're building hardware, you are obviously also building software. But back then that was a challenge. But I think we would call ourselves I don't know what we call ourselves. I think we called ourselves a peer tracking app but when I had conversations with investors, I would actually never say the word
Why?
period or menstruation. I just, because I always wanted to sort of try and include them, talk about the things where we could have a shared experience, where we could have a conversation that felt, in a way, emotionally engaging, because I know that investment is not actually as much a business conversation as you would think it could be, or maybe should be. It's very much like, does investors care about this? Do they relate to it? And I didn't want to sort of alienate them.
And I mean, the thing is, does it mean that the majority of the investors you talked to were men, and they could be alienated by the word period? And why do you think is that? I mean, I'll get back to the femtech term because it's also interesting, but why?
Maybe I didn't give enough credit to the men, because I did feel that they were really interested, but there were also many other things to talk about. We could talk about the data and the science and the KPIs and the data privacy and the brand and many other things. And I just don't think I felt a need to sort of kind of put it in their faces in a way. I didn't feel that it was embarrassing or uncomfortable, but it just didn't seem helpful. I think that was the sense.
Okay, I have a question, kind of embedded later on in our conversation to get back to this. But another thing I wanted to kind of explore around the term femtech is that what does it mean right now? Like, what kind of what kind of vertical that is, and what kind of products, or what kind of innovation does femtech include right now? Because I can give you an example of my own. My startup is a marketplace that connects women in particular with physical activity. And we were at the accelerator that was femtech. And we were surrounded by products and innovation that served primarily reproductive health. So whenever we pitched to to the investors of that of that space, we were largely misunderstood. Like we would get no questions, we would get no interest, we would get like no, and kind of,
Mhm.
I can assume, that had something to do with the way, we pitched, or with the quality of our pitch. I'm not discounting that, but the majority of the feedback we got is that, like, why are you even here? Like, why? Like, you're not dealing with reproductive health. You're not like in this women's only kind of space. Like, why is that? And we tried to, like, in our pitch, we tried to say, hey, this, the access to physical activity is as important, because it's prevention, and it's also like it helps with mental health, which is increasingly important for women. And women suffer from the lack of access to physical activity and information about, like-minded sports communities and things like that. And it's a whole social issue, and it cannot not be femtech. But, like, you see what I mean? It's kind of, like, it's how femtech is now in, the space that I see is being treated. So, like, I'm wondering, like, what did you have in mind when, and what do you think femtech is right now?
Um, well, I don't get to be sort of judge, but when we coined the term, it was technology that addressing needs that are specific to females, so people with female biology. And in our minds, we were probably thinking a lot about reproductive health because that's what we were thinking about every day. And I actually don't think that the definition has changed, but I think our understanding of what is in that definition has changed. So now, as you mentioned, right, we know that, women have different symptoms, or they have more symptoms, or they're different symptoms in things like cardiovascular health or mental health, brain health, bone health. And of course, in my mind, you can absolutely imagine that you can tailor products specifically to women regarding physical exercise. And everything in women's health is seeped in cultural context. I mean, absolutely, 100%. That goes all the way down to, how we do clinical trials, how we test medication, how we treat patients, what we insure. I mean, everything that looks sort of factual and sciencey and political, like, I mean, it's, or not political, but like policies that have been made, they are absolutely formed by culture. So I think I'm not surprised with the experience you've had, because I think there's a lot of education that still has to go into a culture, to expand culture, to understand, like, how do we, you know, care for women. And honestly, Elena, I think that if we truly took women's bodies seriously, we would rebuild the whole world. I
Yeah.
think, I think if we overlaid, how do we build cars with data sets on what does it feel like to have a woman's body, we would probably build cars differently, right? We know the stories about the seat belts and
Yeah.
the proportions and many things, but I am 100% sure that if you put some really creative, great female designers and gave them full freedom to like design the optimal car that really feels good on your body when you're pregnant, when you're breastfeeding, when you have period cramps, when you have endometriosis, when you have osteoporosis, all these things, yeah, we would get a different car.
Yeah.
So, of
Yeah.
course, we need a product to be like, hey, we need to make women move, and it's going to take something different. So I have sympathy for the people who are like, what are you doing here? But I also have sympathy
Yeah.
for you be like, no, I should be here.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it's yeah.
But, like, even like, just to get a bit more to your argument, the way we would build a different world, because, right now, because the women's sports is on the rise, they started
Hmm.
researching, like, how, I mean, we kind of know it by now, but it's not, widely known knowledge. So, like, you're, especially if you're an elite athlete, your practicing cycles coincide with the practice, like with your natural menstrual cycle, right? So the things that they, found out when they started exploring, right, and they discovered that women are like 79% more prone to have the ACL injuries,
at a specific time of their cycles. So the trainings of elite athletes, even recreational ones, needs to be optimized in order to prevent like these injuries are season ending and sometimes career ending. So if you tear your ACL, like you're done, right? So if you want to keep the high performance athletes performing highly, you need to take this into the consideration. And another thing is, about designing the whole world. Our, I think, second episode was with Tiliana Minkovska, the founder of the Matrix. So the Matrix, like she's an architect who trained in designing healthcare systems. So, how she came up with the Matrix was she started exploring the speculum, and she discovered, yeah, exactly, you make the face, everyone makes the face when you say the word speculum, because you feel the cold steel, in a certain region of your body, right? And you're like, right, it's exactly the thing. So what she found out is that speculum is actually the heritage from the colonial past. This is how, women who were slaves were examined in order to be, I'm sorry, sold at a better price, to have like, exactly, like they were examined like cattle. But this practice kind of transpired over the ages, and we're still kind of we're still being examined with the same type of tool, which is very impersonal, very traumatizing sometimes, especially if you have vaginal spasms. And she redesigned this whole thing. So right now her speculum is something completely different. It's made of this medical grade silicone. It has the like embedded how to call that, a little camera, so you can explore things better. And it has another feeling, when and this you are not bound to have that, because there are different sizes. It can adjust to your anatomy. And this is exactly what you're saying. Like, it just took one thought to transform completely the experience that we're having, because you're given the freedom, and sort of freedom, to be able to actually do that, right? So it's I can absolutely relate to what you're saying. And I know the road is long, and I know it has to be like on all stages of on all strata of of the world, pretty much. But speaking of which, do you think, how do you think femtech is, like, as a space for innovation? How do you think it's evolving? And what do you think, what kind of innovation, in your view, would be like on the rise and getting more and more traction, so to speak?
I think when Clue and other companies started sort of around 12, 13, it was a lot about trying to get data either from people tracking, or maybe sort of sensors, sort of simple sensors sitting on your wrist, stuff like this. And then these sensors became more advanced, like the Oura Ring, all these things. But now I see that there are more technologies that are really trying to look into the body on a more molecular level. So, using menstrual blood for biomarkers, or continuous monitoring of blood sugar or other things. I think that's really, or home diagnostics, like, testing for breast cancer and urine, stuff like this, hormone testing, so many things. So I think that's going to be more a thing. Like, we will have, if you think of us being able to have like our health data on a dashboard, I think we're just it's gonna go like boom, and then we have like so many more things we can look at to understand what's going on. I mean, it's absurd. Why don't we have longitude data on our hormonal lives? Like, maybe it could help us with the predictive models for when we're going to go into menopause. That would be nice. And then I also see that there are more innovation that requires deeper integration to the healthcare systems, like robotics and different protocols for finding endometriosis to make that whole diagnostic disaster better, or different protocols for osteoporosis screening. So it's exciting. I just see so much innovation. First of all, there's there are so many things that needs to be fixed, all the way from like, the tool that you just described to, our, I don't know, like leaves when we get pregnant, or like, everything from the really concrete to the really big sort of systemic ways we have organized society.
Sure. And I think, the more attention we're bringing to that, I think it really works like as the pieces of the puzzle that come together. Because like, I mean, the thing that you mentioned about the seatbelts, everyone, like I know, even, the men I know, most of them have read The Invisible Women by now, which was like, I mean, these facts were known by us, but they were put together in a book, and the book became the bestseller, and the book became, largely quoted, and that's why people started paying attention to those things. And there were examples about toilets, for example, which has to do with menstrual health, because the argument that she's making there in this book is that we need larger stalls and we need more space, and we don't need to queue for the toilet break. And the reason why there are always queues in the women's cubicles, and there are almost none in the men's, is just because the nature of the things we need to do in a toilet, and that's the thing. But you've mentioned something very interesting, and I wanted to ask for your opinion about that. Do you know that the founder of Spotify is now running a new startup, which is a health startup? So he has this booth where you enter, and it does a complete scanner of you, like it scans you completely. I don't know how they achieve that, but like it's a groundbreaking technology, which is obviously patented. But the thing is, it kind of creates a huge database, right? So it runs you against the database and kind of predicts what kind of issues you currently have, what kind of issues you're bound to have, and gives you kind of a complete rundown of the of your health status. And this is something that costs actually 200 euros or something, so it's not hugely expensive by now. But the thing is, like, I would be curious to see, based on what you said about data and understanding, like how much of that data they've got on women. Because if you're running a prediction model against, a database, like, is this database inclusive? Does this?
No, that's a total given that there is a huge data gap. And whether a service like this, where you kind of expect an outcome as a consumer, is the right place to gather that data, I don't know, because as you're right, that you kind of need to first have some data to build on. And then there's many other problems around these kind of screening things. Do you get too many false positives? Do you freak people out about things that don't have to be freaked about? Do you actually catch the things that are important? So there are many questions, but I think, fundamentally, yes, we need to collect much more data on women. And we need to also then use the data that we have, because I know that there is just often a tendency that you don't look at data sets that are gendered. So you don't kind of, you don't have the right gender lens as you use data. So
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
But
Yes
what
is
do
the
you,
answer.
but what do you think? What do you think can be done? Like, what can we do, or what needs to be done in general? How do we kind of make sure the data is inclusive in the apps, or in health initiatives that are not specifically femtech, but are about health, that can as well be for the bodies that are born women's bodies.
Again, I think it's an awareness thing, right? The people who collect the data, design the studies, or design the data collection, they have to have this gender awareness, so that they can make sure that the data set they get is representative. It's not only gender, right? It's also,
Yes.
for instance, when we went through FDA clearance to be a contraceptive at Clue, we had to demonstrate that the testing we did was on a representative cut of the population. This was in the American population, right? So that was across a lot of different parameters. Yeah, and at the end of the day, somebody has to care, right? There has to be some people who can make decisions, who think it's important, who care, and can see that it can be a business advantage, that it does good in the world, that is a sense of fairness and equality and equal access and all other things. So, and then there has to be investors who value that. There has to be the limited partners of the funds who say, yes, we also think this is a success criteria. We think this is important. So it's the whole chain, the whole value chain or food chain, maybe.
Yeah. Well, speaking about the food chain in a way. So again, another example. I went to two events within the week of the Web Summit, and they were kind of on the margins of the Web Summit. One of them was Europe's 100 hottest startups, and the other one was held in a church, and it was the impact startups. So I went out of the first event, which was the hottest Europe startups. I was like, like I was not disillusioned, but like they were so one directional for me, meaning that, I mean, again, like, and it's my own bias, I realize that, but they were like all very much engineering, like, oh, we don't have a prototype yet, but we already raised 6 million and we're raising another 50 to build the model, which might influence the way we're getting wind energy or solar energy or whatever energy. And they were all like this. Maybe they were like clumped together on this basis. I don't know. But like I went out of there and I was like, okay. And then I go to the second event and it has a completely like different vibe, but like it is based in a church. You pitch in a church. And I mean, the irony of that is actually great. I really, I was like, yeah. And the thing is, one of them, or actually two of them, were the femtech startups. And one founder actually said, yes, I'm going to talk about vaginas in a church. Yes, this is what I'm gonna do. And we're like, we use like we now it's our catchphrase, and I feel like we should print it as t-shirt or something. But the thing is, the space where the femtech startups were pitching was the impact space, and the biggest problem I see with the impact is that it's not treated as a business. It's treated as an NGO, glorified, or like in the innovative type of an NGO. So it's not prone to getting any sort of like proper investment, and femtech is also like lumped into the space. Like these guys who are building a new wind turbine are getting 6 million without any prototype, and and these people are in the church. Okay, great, but like they're not getting any funding, because the common conception is like, oh, like they're an impact startups, and impact for some reason is translated as like, oh, their business models are not working or never going to work. That's why we're not gonna invest in them, and they can just rely on grants. Has it also been your experience, and do you think there is a like there is this issue with the impact startups and the femtech startups as such, that it's stuck in this kind of gray area, and it really does affect the fundraising for the femtech startups in particular.
Mm. I remember when we started raising money, so out of Germany, and we were sort of looking a little over at the sort of impact space, and it just looked so dusty and like it was not going to go anywhere. And it was like, I mean, that just seemed totally impossible if you're trying to build like what we were trying to build. I think that space has changed some, and I think the investment or the impact investors are getting more sort of tech savvy or something. And but I also think that the more traditional investors are realizing that there is money to be made when you think about more things than only making money. Like it's actually part of a healthy business to also care about like the environment and people and data privacy and all other things. So I feel there is some merging, but I mean, it is a huge issue that that the idea we have of what success is to only make money. I mean, I have over and over sat in pitch rooms, and all the value that I knew we were building, which was not down to that one number of revenue, just didn't count for anything. Maybe active users back in the days, now not as much. It's really revenue only. I just don't think we're going to get a healthy planet. Like we need to care about other things as well. And I really feel that we are past the point as a civilization where we can afford ourselves the privilege to have these blinds on and be like, oh, I have become a billionaire, so I'm successful. It's like, yeah, but like the forest is burning, your city is flooded, there is huge like wealth inequality. Like, are you really a success? Like, you just created this mess. So I think it is changing, but slowly.
Mhm.
And for sure, women's health cannot be shoveled down into it, just has to be like all for social. Like, that's why should we not build successful companies that makes money? Of course we can do both. And I think this idea that if you work in women's health, you have to be like only altruistic. No, you can build good businesses, and everybody building businesses need to also care about the world. There should be no difference,
How do you
really.
combine the two? How do you combine the two? Because actually, like what I've seen, like I loved, most of the ideas that were pitched in a church, naturally, yeah, EPAC, but because I could relate to the, like, even though, like I might not have been the target audience, for example, like there was one startup that was building language models on the languages that are disappearing or that are not included in current language models. So they were addressing a very big issue of the AI only utilizing English as a language, meaning that other regional languages are disappearing. And I'm like, like I'm not. I mean, for instance, my wife really does care about her native language, and she cares if this culture lives or dies. I'm kind of less so. But the thing is, like, I could relate to this issue, and the product that they were building like really spoke to me. But at the same time, like when they had the slides, like, and the jury mostly, like, gotta tell you, the jury mostly asked about the business models and go to market strategies and things like that. And the problem was that I could look at this business model and say, oh my god, no, it's not going to work. It's like it's not the model that will really get you where you need to be commercially. And what is your opinion on that? What do you think? What kind of models? I mean, I understand like different products require different models, but in your opinion, what are the kind of one fits all in a way? I mean, if there is such a one fits all kind of commercialization route that femtech startups can take. No, not.
I don't think there is no I don't think there is one model that will fit all, not at all. I mean, you will have some products that need to be paid by, hospitals, and some will be paid by private people. Some will be paid by governments because there's no way neither the hospital nor the private person can pay for it. Um, and some places the same product will be sold cheaper, and some places it will be sold more expensively. So I think there are many models. But for instance, I mean, the language thing, if you are the person in charge of building Google's translation services, do we include these 17 languages that so few people will use and it's going to be expensive? Do you think that's worth doing? Like, that's the choice you have. And there you can be the kind of a company who takes pride in saying, yes, we wanted to, maintain cultural diversity across the planet, and we have the scale where we can do this. And
Mhm.
other people look at that company and be like, cool, you're cool dudes. Like, we like that you did that. Or people can be like, no, they didn't optimize and they were not, as cost effective as they could have been. We're going to punish them. It's
But who's
choices.
gonna invest in them? Like, okay, I was sitting there and I was like, okay, if I had a small check to write, I would write a check to the femtech
Mm,
startup and
mm.
called Perry Pear, and to this startup as well, because like I completely can relate with an issue. Like I can work with you to optimize the business model perhaps, but like like I, because this speaks to me in terms of my values, but I don't have that access. I'm not a venture capitalist, I don't run a firm, and I didn't have to raise the money to invest it into the startup. So I'm like, yeah, my imaginary, I don't know, 20K would go to you, because I don't have it right now. But like when we speak about traditional investment, like do you think they're likely to go for something like that? Oh, you're a cool dude, you're addressing a very marginal problem that might not give me the ROI that I expect. Like,
I mean, I think there is also a room for something that is more charity or grant, or like a foundation that is, specifically caring about languages or whatever the issue might be. I mean, that's also, there's plenty of people who have more money than they need and they can put it where they want to. Or governments can prioritize it. It doesn't all have to be commercially viable either. I think there is a huge middle space where we can both make money and make sure we don't mess up people and planet and all the other species. Like it's it's a choice we make. It's essentially like, what world do we want to build? And I just feel that very often in the tech world, people feel they have the privilege to not ask that question, though they have a totally outsized responsibility and impact on the world, right? The world is being rebuilt in data right now. It's being built by very few people, mostly white men,
Uh-huh.
and they have to ask themselves, like, okay, I mean, I had one experience where I met the founder of a company that had gotten $500 million from Eric Smith, the chairman of Alphabet, the Google, one of, yeah, Google owners. And because he was building a quantum-based AI computer or company. So an AI company builds some quantum computing. And he said, yeah, I knew that I would need that much capital to be able to compete. And I just looked at him and like, that is exactly how we all feel, right? I need to raise this capital to be able to build this product. But do you realize that you just got $500 million to do this thing? Which, by the way, will put you so far ahead of competition in the AI space that literally nobody can compete, or very few companies. And he said, well, Eric Schmidt also gave 100 million so that, European universities could have at least one quantum computer. It's just, so I think this whole question of like, who gets to decide what is being innovated in, who gets to decide what's being built, and the self-awareness to realize that there is a huge democratic vacuum, right? Why and a regulatory vacuum as well. Like, as society, are we okay with very few people building technology that will absolutely transform this planet without any governmental oversight or
Yeah.
any sort of, I mean, those are just wild questions. And I know that there are people who are thinking long and hard and deep about this, who are activists or academics, but the disconnect between the impact that we have as founders and this sort of self-introspection that founders are encouraged to have, because this is not being valued. What's being valued is like, be aggressive and build things
Yeah.
and grow at all
Fast,
costs.
fast, yeah.
So yeah, I would have loved these two events to have been merged. I think, we need the good combination, I think.
But the thing is, when you talk about merging these two things, we also kind of we realize who holds the purse in most of the cases, and
Yeah.
like, and it's
Yeah.
especially, I mean, it's especially important for a space like FemTech. Like, and as you said, like, you wanted to be, when you pitched Clue, you wanted to be inclusive, so you didn't use the word period, and like, did it actually, did you feel like it helped you raise, for Clue, or did you feel like it had any effect? Like, were really, like, what was, okay, my question is, like, what do you feel was the tipping point for you getting investment for Clue? Like, what was that thing that's kind of broke to them and we're like, yes, let's invest in this thing we don't understand and don't experience, that has an impact? And like, how did you reconcile this impact with like this notorious return on investment, as we were discussing it?
We got many no's. That was also like a thing, right? It's not like we found the magic formula and it just worked. Like, not at all. It was really hard work to raise all this capital. I think it helped that I had a male co-founder who was also raising money. I think it absolutely was crucial for many reasons. I also know that the first institutional investor we got on board, he had made a conscious decision where he had said, if we're investing in this space, I want it to be led by a woman. He was like, we cannot have somebody build in this space for periods by somebody who doesn't have a period. And that was a, he actually used his brain, his heart, and he made a decision. It's like, and then he put his money where his mouth was. This
Mm-hmm.
is so rare in venture capital. There are very few, I'm going to say something controversial now. There are very few investors who think from themselves. So much of investment is hype,
Mm-hmm.
follow the flock.
Yeah.
It is fear of missing out. It's there are very few funds who have an investment thesis where they have thought long and deep about something and they're like, we really believe in this and we're going to do this. And that was why, I think that's why, the guy who invested in us, that was why he invested in us. He could
Mm-hmm.
invest in something else, or somebody else building a peer tracker. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for that.
I mean, but it's an interesting point about the male co-founder. Did your co-founder also pitch, like, who, like, when you went to those investment meetings, who pitched, or how did you how did you split?
We have tried all versions, believe me. I pitch, you pitch, we pitch together. I take the
Uh-huh.
first meeting, then they get to meet the CEO afterwards, or
Uh-huh.
the other way around, or you do it alone, or you do it alone. We bring somebody more from the team, or we don't. I think it's like it's a social game, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very like, does this, like, do you feel this? Do you believe in this? VCs, they have to say no all the time. Like, they want to say no. Like, that's the safe thing, is to say no, right? So you really have to get them like, somewhere like really comfortable to like be like, okay. I mean, of course, they probably want to say yes, but they know that they have to mostly say no. And so when you enter the room and there's like a bunch of guys and there you are as a woman, you are like already like disturbing the space somehow on a very subconscious level. I think it's just like you are this disturbance, and what was kind of easy and like a way of talking or jokes or something, and then suddenly there's this sort of and how do I feel safe enough to trust this woman with all these millions, and do I even get what she saw? It's such a bar to get over. And I knew that if I had like an hour with these people, like I would get them to at least end the meeting be like, wow, that's really interesting, like something had expanded in their minds. And this kind of educational work was huge. I hope it's getting less, but this, like, is this even a thing? I asked my wife, she doesn't think it's a thing. And I'm like, I have 10,000 emails of women who've told me it's a thing. And here you are, and your stupid wife, who's happy on her pill, said it wasn't a thing. I'm like, I just want to explode, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think having a guy, because also the deal making often actually doesn't happen in the pitch room. It happens on the elevator going there, or at that dinner, or because they got the warm intro for somebody they trust, or actually they just want to be co-found or co-investors with this other fund that they think is fancy, or some other bullshit that you're like, what's going on?
Yeah. Oh,
So,
I can so relate. I
mhm,
felt it so many times, and I can absolutely relate. And then also, like, I can relate to that when I was doing sports, because the sports that I was doing were mostly like team sports where you would have, I'll be like the only woman in that
mhm,
space. And I'm so
mhm.
used to coming and disturbing that space. And I'm so used to the
Mm.
behavior where they're like, oh, should I pass the ball to you? Like, ever?
Yes.
Can you
Oh
actually
gosh,
do anything?
I've
Like,
been
let's,
there. I've been there.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So like,
yes.
what's your sport, by the way? What do you do?
I mean, I remember as a child, it was football. I was the only girl, and they wouldn't like pass the
Yeah,
ball. And
yeah,
after a while,
exactly.
it's like, okay, I'll just quit then.
Yeah,
But
yeah. You become invisible.
yeah.
That's what it is. Like, you become
Mm,
invisible in the field, and you have to be like so much, and even like the level of mistake. And it's so telling because it is exactly the same in the startup world. So like whenever
mm,
a guy makes a mistake, like drops the ball or like, doesn't score or anything, they're like, yeah, okay. If you
mm,
don't do something or you make a mistake, it's
mm,
terrible. Like, they're like, oh my God, I trusted her with that. Of course she screwed up. Of
mm.
course she
But
screwed up.
Elena, we know the data, right?
Yeah,
We know
exactly.
that
We
women
know.
return capital more
I
efficiently.
was
They are more
about to
cash efficient.
say, yes, I was about to say
Um, yeah, yeah.
78 cents on a dollar invested, as opposed to 30 cents from male investors. That's the figures, that's the data. And I was like, thank you for for saying this, because I was just about to throw this in, right? So, and this data, like, it needs to be really widely spread, because like what are the figures? Like, the latest research shows like we receive 23% less of capital, but in fact, like, there is another data that says it's 3% of all capital that is being, invested. It goes actually to the female founders, and that's that's the math that doesn't add up at all, right? And if
No, it
it's
doesn't add
like,
up.
but if it's all psychological, if it's all like, the brotherhood of men kind of thing, like, how do we, like, again, like, it's not a recipe. How do we change that?
I think there are a lot of great principles from this sort of product world of tech that we could apply. We can have ratings, we can collect data, we can make the data, available and visible, we can hold people accountable. Like, why doesn't it say at the front of every single website of VC funds, how many percent of your money went to female investors? How many percentage of female founders do you have in your portfolio? How many female partners do you have? Just put it on just put the data there. Just that one single thing would actually help. And by the way, you can rate me as a portfolio company. I can rate you an investor. Everybody who thinking of taking you as an investor, they can just see how you're scored. We have that on like Airbnb. Like, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Because venture capital is essentially a system where, there's nothing wrong with investing as a principle, right? I take a risk, I get a return if it works. But venture capital, as it is built right now, there is this power imbalance where somebody who sits and negotiate for a living will meet somebody who's doing this for the first time, and there is this sort of kind of built-in two lies. First lie is it's fancy to raise money. It's a like badge of honor or success. That's the first problem. Yeah, the second problem is this idea that investors don't really need the startups, but as a startup, you really need the investor. So there's this power imbalance, which is it's just prone to like unfairness, to be extractive, to have all the gender biases built in. And we could have systems that were more transparent, streamlined, because another big problem when you raise money is that the timeline is a total like ungiven, like you don't know what's going to happen. Most meetings you go to is a complete waste of time. They don't lead to anything. So it's a really wasteful system. There's no predictability. It's hard to plan around. It's intransparent. It's prone to gender bias. Could we look at venture capital and maybe fix this? It's like the spine of the startup world in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And yet, as a product, it is so broken.
I had an interesting conversation with an angel investor, and she's a woman who her name is Cynthia Mano. We recorded her in the video as well on YouTube. So she's the head of this Core Angels Investment Association. And like the conversation we had was really, really interesting, because like at her heart, she understands the system is broken. But at the same time,
yes,
she's saying like, I'm advising the startup, like, okay, so that's the take. What she's saying is like, I'm advising the female startup founders to play the game, which is, again, like it could be treated differently. Like, on one hand, what she said was great, meaning that you need to be more confident. You need to be more like straightforward. You need to like really kind of go for it, be more aggressive. Because what she was saying, because what she was saying is like a lot of female founders who build, let's say, like, I don't know, a rocket, right? They come in and they're like, yeah, I made something with my sister in the kitchen, and this is my product. So something like that. And then there'll be a guy who comes in and he has like a matchbox, right? So oh yeah, sorry.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get it, but I think it's we always need to fix the women. I want to train the men to look at the people who come in and be like, I built something, and then be like, she's going to be a great leader. And by the way, she's really smart and she has a really good idea.
Yeah.
So it goes two ways. But as a woman, you also have to be pragmatic, right? There is a system. If you want the money, yeah, go in and be confident, because that's going to work.
Yeah.
And then, I mean,
But are we changing the
and
rules
then,
of the game by acting like this? That's the thing, like, are we, if
Mm.
we're playing the game, but the game is not designed by us, right? We're playing somebody's game. So like, is anything really going to change if we just adjust to these rules? Okay, we get the money for now, right? But it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change the
yeah,
system at all.
we probably have to do both. And we have to also create our own system. So people starting their own funds, stuff like this. And we have to be vocal, and we have to say like, no, that was not a cool joke, or like, But I will also say, you are going to need like somehow some sort of core strength to build a company. I mean, this is not for the faint-hearted, right? It's not for everybody, and it doesn't have to be for everybody. So you have to somehow grow into like a really big version of yourself, because it doesn't serve anybody if you're not. But I think women have more room and power to actually shape things their own way than they necessarily know, like how they build cultures in their companies, how they make work life work for them if they're also having a family, all these things. But it takes a lot of courage. And it definitely takes that you find people around you that will support you in some way, or the founder, like the investors that kind of get it. But I mean, it's not easy. It's like small steps.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, but there is truth on both sides, right? I mean,
Yeah.
But one thing I want to say, I have only met good people in venture capital. It's not like people are fine. I know that there are probably horrible people that do horrible things. I'm not saying that's not a thing, but I have personally met nice people. It's a system that's broken. And a lot of people will have this internal conflict of like, we see it's a broken system, but how are we going to do it differently? And again, then investors have to be very courageous and go back to the LPs and say, we want a different mandate, or say, we're going to make a bet on these ones, even though they're fumbling and they look like they can never ever run a huge billion-dollar company. Let's give them a chance anyway, Or, wow, we really don't know how to coach these people to be great leaders. We need some different kind of training here.
What do you think about the accelerators and their role in this whole, startup process? Do you think they're helpful? Do you think, they're a good step towards getting the investment, especially for the femtech startups? Or, what's your view on that?
I mean, I'm sure there are good accelerators and not so helpful accelerators, but I think fundamentally it's really important to have an ecosystem around you. And there is a lot of knowledge. Sometimes when I speak to early stage founders, I realize how much I've learned, but you forget what you don't know, right? So there are many things that is actually really helpful to have somebody help you learn. Yeah, and then there's, of course, do you give equity away? Is that the fair amount? I mean, there can be many things that maybe needs adjustment, but fundamentally, sort of helping people with skills to build businesses, I think is good.
But do you feel like in the space of femtech, this is something that could, bridge this gap between getting the first investment and actually, like staying afloat, developing the idea and kind of getting access to the investors that, kind of understand what femtech is?
Mm. Yeah, I think it is helpful. I think it is helpful. I just, when we talk about sort of gaps, I would say there is a huge gap also to be filled around later stage femtech. There are actually early stage femtech funds now, but there is nothing for later stage. That's a problem.
Oh, that's an interesting
Because
point.
I actually see quite a few companies who've maybe been around for like 3 to 5 years. They have built their products, they have the first revenue, they have proven market fit, and now they are ready to like, okay, but then they need like real capital, and it's so hard to get. The ones who need like, I don't know, 5 to 10 million in femtech, it's tough. And it's really, and at that point, they do have a burn, they have many people that they feel really responsible for. So the pressure is like so high to try and get this capital. And and they're like, we have everything. If we can't raise money now, what will it take? I mean, we have had that experience many times with Clue. It's like, okay, if we cannot raise money, we have done it all, and we still can't find the capital. Like, what is going to take? And sometimes I really felt like I want Clue to succeed, just so that there can be like one example that people can be like, yo, you can get more money to build these things. I mean, of course, we are not the only one who have raised this kind of capital, but there are not that many. I was like, if we are going to fail with all the things we got right, like it just seems so hopeless, you know?
Yeah.
And but luckily it was not hopeless. I mean, Clue is still around and doing really well, and there's more and more companies coming. And
how did you do that? What happened in your story? Like, what was how did you secure more capital? Like, how did you find investors who were willing to to invest in you at a later stage?
Our existing investors have saved our butts a few times. They also definitely took full advantage of that position. But the markets were crashing, or we had spent 2 years getting FDA approval, but then we really just had to make money fast, and that product didn't lend itself to the kind of a super fast, aggressive rollout. So you have to do things really thoughtfully, etc. Or everybody was like, just focus on getting monthly active users, and then suddenly it was like, actually make some money. We're like, okay, and then suddenly you don't have the right numbers to go out and raise capital. So we have had really committed and patient investors. Again, they took full advantage, but we survived. And now I think Clue is in a really good position to potentially go out and raise a larger growth round. But yeah, I don't. There is no magic bullet. I remember once I'd been out pitching a long time together with my co-founder, and he was so frustrated because it always felt like we had everything and we got no's and no's and no's. And we were like, what is the secret X that makes this not work? Like, am I wearing the wrong glasses? Am I not wearing the right? Am I bad at pitching? Is it because we're like, we kept, scanning the brains for like, why is this not working? And he was just like, now I'm a feminist. Like that sense of like, the thing that makes this not work is because we are like, racing for a female health company and you're a woman. It's just that moment of like, it doesn't add up. Like, what is going on? It's like, what can I fix? And then you just keep going until somehow it works. I think, I owe a lot of the success to raising money to having a male co-founder, and him also being good at it and being a very good sort of network and social person. And like, it's yeah.
But it's interesting. It's interesting how this experience turned your co-founder into a feminist. Speaking of which, but again, like I think it's a very natural bridge to the question. I mean, tell me if you hate this joke, but let's address the unicorn in the room. Would you would you be open to discuss the story of Flo?
Yeah, sure.
So how do you like when you say, when you say with Clue, you were like, okay, let's focus on getting the users, let's focus on earning the money, and like you see Flaw as a startup led by two male co-founders achieving the unicorn status, where I frankly feel you blazed the trail. Like how did it make you feel? Like what was how?
I mean,
Yes.
I mean, I have known Flow for many years, right?
Yes.
Since they came on the market after us. I think really big picture, it's great that there are people who see that you can build a really big company in this space that will make many conversations easier for people who come after, including Clue, I believe. So it's a good thing. I think the problem I maybe have is that I just don't think that they are very attuned to their users. I think they create a product that feels very gender normative. And I feel sad that so many millions of women are met with a product that is not as good as it could have been. So, and that's.
Do you think it's an issue with like male leadership? Like, because
yes,
okay.
I think, yes, I do think so. I think it matters a lot that you have people who deeply care about solving a problem for people out there. I have met one of the founders, and he said to my face, when we started this company, we didn't care about female health. They were serial app builders, and they could see a market opportunity. It was their third attempt of building a period tracking app. I think maybe over the years they realized, oh, it's actually like a really important space. I think they somewhat got educated along the way. But that deep care for your users is important. And I think men can have it too. But if you really are attuned with your female users, you will know that you don't know and that you have to be close to people who know, right? There are so many functions in a startup. You absolutely need men to be part of building femtech companies, 100%. But the ones who are arrogant enough to think that they can do it without being on eye level with a diverse team are just going to end up building suboptimal products. I feel I've seen that. And Flow copied my vision statement and put it on the website when they started. They have copied everything we've done. I mean, I feel we've shown them how to build a decent app, but they are very good executors, and now they're trying many different things, and they have a huge marketing engine that gives them the growth. I mean, they're very good at many things, but I think at the core, the product will suffer if the people don't deeply care.
How do you think they achieve this explosive growth? And do you think
well, maybe their competitors were kind of doing stupid things at a critical couple of years, had like problems on their management team. I don't know. I mean, we made many mistakes. We did. I think there was probably a moment in time where we could have, gotten the same kind of growth, and we didn't because we made mistakes. I made mistakes as the CEO. But I also know that they founded the company with a huge investment from a VC that actually was their own money, which made the valuation be really high, that put them on a track. And they have, violated privacy laws, first in America, now in Canada. I mean, illegal things. They have absolutely, been very shady on how they have handled people's very sensitive data. So I think that's where it gets kind of interesting for me. It's the systemic issues, right? We have apparently a tech system that values bad behavior. Their investors say, they look around in the marketplace and they're like, you are the period tracker that we're going to put 200 million euros behind, even though you have 2 criminal offenses. I'm like, but we have, there are other options. It's like, why do you choose to do that? And it's like, well, they had maybe better growth, but yeah. But at the end of the day, I think you as a founder, you build your business the way you think is the ethical right way to do it. And you build the best product you can, and you care about the metrics that you think are important, and you hope that users will care too, and you hope somebody will fund you enough. And then you will see in the long run what's the winning strategy. When we started building Clue, we built data privacy as like part of our foundation. That was like we didn't build a backend till we were like 100% sure we could honor people's data, and we didn't collect more data than we felt that we could build meaningful products and give back to people. So when GDPR came around in Europe, we were pretty much not gender compliant, like data compliant, both, because that's like who we were, right? And back then, it wasn't a given that any users would ever care. And now, fast forward like a little decade or something, I think it's pretty clear in sort of the nature of our culture, or like the people do care about data privacy actually. And
yeah,
I think fast forward another 10 years, I'm pretty sure people will care about not getting, a crap product. In my mind, for the things that I care about, which is like, does it feel gender progressive? Does it feel like solid data and solid science, right? So let's see who wins in the long run.
But do you feel like it's also a question of marketing, like, because if let's say Clue and Flow, right? So if I don't know that Clue exists and I'm not able to compare it, then I'm not able to make an educated choice,
It's absolutely a marketing. That's why it matters to have money, right? Because it's a marketing machine. The more money you can put in And they probably spend, I'm guessing, like at least a million euros a month on digital ads. Then you get high in the ranking, you buy all the search words, like all these things. I mean, if you type in Clue in the app stores, their flow ad will come on top of us. So money matters, but I think in the end, I have to trust that the better product will win. And I feel so confident that Clue is a really, really solid product, you know. And I can say this because it has only gotten, I mean, the last 3 years I haven't built a product. It's not I can't take credit for the product. It's been an amazing team who've done this. And I think it really is a product that just keeps getting better and better.
If I could, put an emoji amen to that, I would do that. Amen to that. It actually made me want to, go and download Clue right away, because I'm using a very basic tracker for my period right now, and I keep forgetting. It's like it's the most basic thing possible. So we read your LinkedIn profile, as we normally do, but we found no, I mean, like, and I also follow you, so I kind of like every post you shared, because it really does resonate. It's not my way as a host to kind of be nice, but like it really does resonate. So
That's nice to hear.
yeah, because I mean, LinkedIn has become such a bragging platform that it's so good to read something meaningful, and your posts actually are meaningful, and they again like resonate deeply. But what you mentioned there is like you're currently working on a book about femtech and think tank to articulate the link between femtech economy and planetary health. Could you tell us more about that, because it's super fascinating?
Yes, because what we talked about before, we have the data to show that if you invest into women, you get better results. It also turns out that if you invest into women's health, you can make money.
Yeah.
As a personal person, like it's actually great to invest into your health, but as a fund, as a company, or as society, like if you invest into women doing well, you will save a lot of money. In fact, McKinsey came out with a report this year saying that if women got adequate healthcare, the world would save $1 trillion every single year. Every single year, $1 trillion. Like it's really expensive that women miss work when they go through menopause, for instance. So I'd love to build this argument. It's like, hey, well, like invest into women's health, make it an investment thesis. It will drive economy. And we also know that when women are well, societies are well. Societies are less prone to go to war. They take better care of the environment. Like so many things are better when women are fully participating in society. So I'd love to try and, if I can raise awareness just around this sort of simple and of course super complex, but in a way simple correlation between female health, money, and planetary well-being.
Oh wow. I mean, my only question towards this is like, how can we help? What can we do to help you?
Thank you. That's very generous. I don't know fully yet, but so this think tank is going to be called FemTech Assembly. And my hope is that it can be a container that feels kind of open and kind of consumer facing. So somewhere where people can participate, not somebody who writes a report once a year and go speak to some people in Brussels. Like I would love it to be more kind of participatory. And because I experienced that there are many people who say, I want to do something in this femtech space. Like I want to put my good energy, my skills there, but how? So I'm hoping to somehow create a container that can channel some of that good energy and also just make the system kind of visible to itself. Like, yeah, we are many people around the globe who are innovating, who are, doing this work, and then trying to figure out how can I be of service to like what are the systemic problems that people are bouncing up against? Where can we go and try and raise awareness there? But I don't know yet fully. Like I'm also very open for ideas.
Another thing that I like, as in like actually push the like button or celebrate button or whatever button on your LinkedIn, is actually your series of posts about female body experience addressed to men.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me more about this? Like, how did this idea come to life? And like, what was, again, like, what was the intention behind it? And what kind of feedback did you receive? And has anything surprised you?
So the idea is to help men understand what women experience because we have the body that we have. And first, I was thinking it as a book idea, like the one-on-one for men about women's health, because my own experience have been that many men, they really want to understand, they want to know, but it's a complete black box. Like they don't get told much. Maybe they have gone through, I don't know, like an infertility process with their partner, then they know a lot about that. But and I think it's hard for the world to invest into women's health if the world doesn't understand what it feels like to have endometriosis or to have breast or to not have great birth control, whatever. And there's so much going on, right? Every woman has a story. Every single woman has a story or several stories, something going on for them. And it's so invisible in our culture. So I was a little frustrated with sort of the publishing world. That's another story, but then I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna start. I'm just gonna start. And my invitation was for women to share their experiences. So the response has been that people say, we love that you do this, and a few share some of their stories. It feels difficult, I think, for people to share these stories. And men say, we love this, but it's hard to share the post so that more men will see it. And my strategy has been, I'm not going to push this. I'm going to do this very gently. I don't tag anybody. I don't have it's just a little gentler thing to see how this goes. Because I don't want to, again, I want this to be really inclusive. I'm writing this to the men. I want the men to feel comfortable reading this. I want them to not feel like, oh, why didn't I know this? Or, oh, I feel bad on behalf of my gender, or like it's a gentle
not feel
open
judged.
invitation.
Yeah, so you're
Don't want
not
to judge
judged.
anybody.
Yeah.
No.
It's like, how
And
did you not know we have hot
exactly,
flashes?
we have this. I mean, it's so easy to get angry because of course we are angry, right? There are many things to be angry about, but I just think the anger I would love to use so that I have the courage to do what I think is helpful if I can. And it's also an experiment into how can you have like a conversation with the world. Because I have written a book. I can't find a publisher in America. I actually just canceled the contract with my agent. It's not going anywhere. So now it's like, okay, but then I can do something else with this content, and kind of be in more of a dialogue, actually, which I think is also really nice. I have not been a social media person ever in my life. This is like my my virgin journey on social
Oh, it's
media,
good.
kind of. So yeah, learning how to do things like in a more two-way communication way.
No, it's
Slowly,
actually
slowly.
great. No, it actually great. It is actually great, and I'm feeling like the algorithm is actually loving your post as well because it keeps showing what you're writing to me at any
Mm,
given time of day. Like you're one of the first people who comes up into my feed whenever I'm
mm,
logging on to the LinkedIn page. So
mm,
you're building something very powerful, and like
mm.
it has an impact, and as we know, impact doesn't take off in an instance.
Yes,
It's a long road,
I
so.
wanted to say this when you asked before, how can we change this? And I want to say it's like something kind of accumulates in society, and then suddenly something is like ready, I, a bit like femtech. I mean, I came up with the word, but I didn't come up with femtech, right? It was
Yeah,
something that was
well, yeah,
happening, and it's
yeah,
like, so I think, or the you too, me too, not you too, me too
yeah.
movement, it's like, so we keep adding,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I
all of us.
mean, yeah, yeah. The second time in this podcast, I wish there was like a sticker saying "Amen" to that. Amen to that.
Yeah,
Not in a religious way, but like, hell yeah.
it gives
So
me so much energy to see how many people are building and
yeah,
doing great
yeah,
things.
yeah.
So many people.
Yeah. And I think it's mutual because like if we can't like if we are in contact with if you're building something and we're also in contact with other people who are building something, A, we don't feel alone. That's one.
Mm,
B, we feel
mm,
like this whole field is moving forward. We are achieving something individually and
mm.
collectively. So
Yeah.
it's not taking the power from us by this
Mm,
exchange, but it's actually given us more power, given us more energy, given us more traction to pursue our individual journey in a collective
mm,
field. Once we discuss the think tank
mm,
and the book, so
mm.
but give us a little bit time and resource. We'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's incredible, and I understand that the power is really in building this community when a lot of people generate this sort of energy. But my final question to you is the question we asked during our pre-call, is how do you see yourself now? Like as an entrepreneur, as an activist, as an educator, as a co-founder, like what are the many facets of Ida Teen right now?
Um, well, I'm kind of floating without any organization like anchoring me anywhere. I'm just kind of me. It's always difficult when people want to put a title, I was like, I'm just like me. Um, I mean, I would love to be, I guess, soon a founder of FemTech Assembly. I think that would be a nice container for me to actually just keep doing what I'm doing already. Trying to move the awareness level up around why women's health is important and why technology is such an powerful tool to apply in so many ways in this space. Yeah, I would love to find a way to share also like longer ideas. Again, this book, maybe I'll self-publish it, was, something to like, I haven't quite found all my channels yet, I think. Um, but I don't know. I don't have like a perfect title for myself. Um,
Which is fair. No. I mean, like, which is fair enough. You don't have to be one. You don't have to be three. You don't have to be 15,000. Like
mm,
it's just a bunch of words of describing how you feel,
yeah,
not how you fit in. And that's an important point. It's
yeah.
about how you feel. It's not about you fitting into some sort of
Well,
system or container or anything.
I'm definitely opinionated. I think I'm,
But that's great.
um,
That's great. No, that's great.
yeah.
Because I mean, like you have opinions, but at the same time, what I love about what you were saying is like you are not, because I feel like I am kind of approaching things in the same way when I talk to men, for example, like that's why I feel like sometimes we are antagonistic, but it depends on the other person on the other end. Like they really get like sometimes, but
Mm,
it's how you like you are opinionated, but the way you bring your opinion forward is actually very important. You're not
mm,
you're trying to understand the other person. You're not trying to attack the other person, and that's
mm,
crucial in any sort of opinion. Like you are entitled to your own opinion, but you're
mm,
also like you're not you're not placing the blame on anyone, right? So and I think
mm,
it's what makes it great, and it's what makes it important. It makes people want to listen to what you have to say. So
mm.
hey, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something really important about feeling that you can have agency and
Yeah,
shape your own world
yeah.
without it meaning that you thereby say that somebody did something wrong. Like,
Hmm.
you know, many things have gone wrong in the history of men and women, but it's also hurting men
Yeah,
wildly.
absolutely.
So, say, how do we form and have agency without the blame?
And that's a very good
Maybe.
open question to to finalize this conversation. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in here today,
My
for having
pleasure.
this very honest conversation as we promised. And we are looking forward to collaborating with you, and we are looking forward to be able to drive this space forward together in any
Yeah.
capacity as
Yes.
you might need us.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. We all pull.
Yeah. Amen to that again. All
Yeah.
right.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
one. Bye.
Thank you. And thanks for doing the podcast.